Okay, welcome to WPTV. This is Wisdompreneurs coming at you live in living color. And today we have three amazing women, including myself, that would be four. And we will be speaking to Tales of Inclusion, which is the tales that we kicked off. And we had this TV show last week. And we will also be talking a little bit about the events that are coming up in February during Wisdom Week. And we're going to start with meditation because that's something that's part of the wisdom in Wisdompreneurs, and because I can feel that I really need to be a little more grounded and centered in this moment. I was excited about the conversation we were having before we got on air. Excited to see these ladies. I haven't seen the lovely Miss Melissa Green Suitor for quite some time. So let's sit together and then we'll move from there. I'm going to ring a bell. We'll sit for a minute, invite you all into this practice of returning again and again to your breath. Letting everything else go. If you notice something arising, you can just touch it, say hello, and come back to your breath. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Ooh, I needed that. And I also am just remembering that one of the things that I said to both Selena and Ginger and Melissa is, and that I've been saying about this show, is that I don't want it to be this neat, perfect webinar series. I really want this to be whatever it is, and to invite myself and each of us into being real, and that if I'm not perfect and Little Miss Webinar interview WPTV co-founder of Wisdompreneurs, that that's okay. And here I am in this moment, and sometimes this moment is messy, and sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes messy is beautiful. And so I said this last time, I think, little disclaimer, that this is going to be whatever it is, and we're following that flow, and that's intentional, and we're not trying to make it all something. So anyway, welcome. I'd love for each of you ladies to introduce yourselves, and then Ginger, if you'll start us off, and we'll go from there.
So hello everyone. I'm Ginger Murray, and I'm a writer and a a messy, hopefully beautiful person, or trying to live a messy, beautiful life. It's something I excel in, and to a certain extent one could say that I'm an artist of that. So in all the ways that that could possibly mean. And I'm excited to be a part of this, and it's this idea of exploring how we fit, how we belong, how we don't feel that we belong, and how we create experiences for people to be heard, to be recognized, to be respected for the unique, complicated, messy, miraculous person that they are, and to be able to have that experience. So we're very excited today to have Melissa Green as our guest, and we get to explore you a little bit. So I wanted to start with I want you to talk about all the amazing work that you do, because you do a lot of incredible things, and you are a person of firsts, which is always exciting. And then we can start off with a question that we did last week, which is To the degree that you want to talk about that, what your heritage is, your ancestry, your family background, whatever part of that you want to tell us about.
Thank you so much. Aloha, everyone. I am signing in from beautiful Maui, Hawaii. So I'm actually living a big part of my dream, and that's, you mentioned first, and definitely feel in my life that I'm such a trailblazer. I do a lot of first kind of things. So this is definitely one of them. And I'm Melissa Green, transitioning into Melissa Sutor, which is my married name. I got married just a little over a year ago. So that's kind
Congratulations.
Thank you. Very exciting. And that actually touches on a part of my heritage in a lot of different ways. I grew up in Alabama, very rural, like out in the country, out in the woods, and it was quite a different environment than what I live in now. Kind of what I've explored through my life. So I grew up in a single-parent home. My mother was a teenager when she had me, and then had my sister like a year or so, just a year and a bit after. And we grew up in a household even below the poverty level. My father was not around, he was absent. So my grandmother lived in the home with us. So it was all of these women. And one of the things about, not having my father around is that I actually didn't know and still don't quite know the whole story of, my mother and him and all that and what happened. So it's just a part of that heritage of kind of not knowing. But something very interesting happened with my sister and me. We later in life, just actually a few years ago, we started kind of talking a bit more about things, and we shared an experience that we both had and we both remembered of being very young, very small, and having a visit with my father's grandmother. And we still don't know what happened or what the story was, but we both remembered sitting in this house and being with this like what appeared to be a Native American woman. She was like sitting in a rocking chair. She had this really long dark hair, and just very much like those kind of photos or paintings you see of these, really powerful like Native American women. And what was so amazing is that I always kind of thought, oh, was that a dream, or was that, just something that I created in my mind? And then, a few years ago when my sister and I both, started talking about it, oh my gosh, that wasn't a dream, that actually happened, that was real. So that's a part of our heritage that we don't really know, but we were able to kind of validate each other. And so there is, this part of Native American that's in the heritage. So I identify as a Black woman or African American. That's the culture that I grew up in. That's what I know. So my mother is, my grandmother, all of that. And very much steeped in that culture, as well as growing up as a Southern Baptist, very fundamental Christian religion. It's kind of like what I guess a lot of people have seen in movies or TV shows. We're like going to church every Sunday. My grandma has on the big old hat, and we're like singing in the choir, and it's just all like lively and amen and hallelujah everywhere. And, and so that was my upbringing. That was my childhood. And as far as diversity and inclusion, Alabama, which when I was growing up in the 70s, so it was still like fresh off of the civil rights movement, and there was so much inequality. It was very much, even though I was in an integrated school, like about half of the students were white and the other half were Black, it was still, and we would, interact and mingle to a point, there was still so much kind of separatism and even underlying, separateness. And that was a lot of my experience, growing up.
We can still hear you, Melissa.
Oh, okay.
Well, I wanted to actually ask about that because, I used to do an event series in San Francisco, and each one had a theme, but I'm dork about history, and so I really wanted to also educate while offering entertainment. So it was music and poetry and dance and burlesque and drag and all kinds of fun things. And I did one about the Appalachian Mountains, and I actually booked a band, and they had grown up there, and that was the music that they played. And they were really, they hugged me and almost cried with a sense. They were like, thank you so much for telling the true history of where we grew up, because there's this perception of the Appalachian Mountains that it's a bunch of toothless, poor people who are, and that's not true at all. In fact, the Appalachia has a very interesting history to it. So I wanted to ask if you've had an interesting experience with people's perceptions of what it's like to grow up in the rural South, and maybe some assumptions that people have about you with that. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yes. I definitely get where you're coming from, because I've had that very much so. It's so funny because I spent all of my childhood and youth in Alabama, and I even did my undergraduate degree there, and I went to a historically black college and university because I felt that it would be a way for me to really feel included, to really feel a part of like a bigger family, and to know that I would be accepted, and I would, really see a lot of people like me who are, getting educated and moving forward in the world and in their lives. But during that, in the summer times, I started doing summer internships up in New Jersey. And it was with like AT&T Bell Labs and all of this, because I decided to study computer science, and it was so different, and I'm up there with these, other students from colleges and universities like all over the country, a lot of people from, the city, and just live very different. And so they would have a lot of questions, they would say, things like, oh, in Alabama, do you guys you ride on horses and you pull like the carts and all this stuff, and what's going on down there? And I was like, oh my gosh, it is behind in a way as far as like progression and all. I would say the South can be about like 50 years kind of behind some of the rest of the country. So it was just really interesting, the kind of comments, and a lot of people would automatically assume that many people in the South aren't educated, or the education is very like subpar, like below level, and do a lot of people even read? I think some people still thought that black people were slaves, even during that time. Like, oh my goodness, so slavery is actually ended, but are people still only do black people still only work in like servitude, or are they only just maids and butlers and nannies and all these sorts of things? So for me, being in this environment where it's like all of these, intelligent engineer types, and they're looking at me like, wow, where'd you come from? What's going on? So it was definitely different, and I ended up connecting with a lot of other like students of color. There weren't like a whole lot of us, but there were like a few of us, and we would connect, and then we would always end up kind of forming a group of like support. And I see that even in just other places like work environments and all that, that is something that can naturally start to happen. Like when someone feels like they're or they're made to believe like they're the other, or they're not so included, can start to form together, form these little groups of support, just to have a way to, yeah, be supported and be seen, and to actually share and talk about like what's going on. I definitely notice that, and it's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And some people don't understand it. I know that, I have a lot of, I have all kinds of people in my life, and some people are maybe a little bit confused why there are groups like, I was very involved with the National Society of Black Engineers. And people go, oh, well, why does there need to be a group of Black engineers? Like, why can't everybody just be in the same, group for engineers? But there's also the Society of Women Engineers, that women engineers want to come together and share their, common experiences on all that and be supported. And some people don't understand that. They feel that we're creating more separatism by having these groups. So instead of looking at it at the way of there needs to be deeper levels of support, and people need to feel, we all need to feel understood. I mean, being understood is one of our like main human needs, to really feel like we're being seen, we're being heard, and someone actually understands what we've been through or what we're going through. So it is important.
Absolutely, and it's also, I mean, that's the thing, because there's a different experience for women in an engineering program. There's a different experience, because this has been talked about a lot, but it's, sorry, cattail in your face, is the subtleties of the differences of experience and even presenting things or going about the work. And so it's important to address those differences and to support each other in that. And I think that that's fantastic. And I had a little bit of a somewhat opposite experience, in the sense that I have often felt more belonging in being the outsider than, so for instance, I lived in London for a couple of years, and it was the first time in my life that I actually felt completely embraced for everything that I was. And it was amazing, and I was adopted by this wild band of hipster gypsies, and for the first time in my life I had a crew, I kind of had a posse, we did everything together, there was just this free-flowing, and I'd always felt on the edges or slightly outside of certain things, and so it was this miraculous, marvelous time in my life, and still is. Many of the people that I knew there are still very close friends. There was this kind of gelling together because, I was the wacky American, and that, that little bit that encompassed all the difference, and so then I could just be a part of it. And then when I came back to the West Coast, and I grew up on the West Coast, I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, I had this issue because, people would ask me where I'm from, and I would say, well, I'm from Eugene, Oregon, and in their minds, I know, they're thinking I just came down the I-5 straight to California, and I was like, no, I did a big U-turn, learned a lot of different things, developed a whole different way of being in the world, so I had to explain that at the risk of sounding pretentious. I was like, no, excuse me, I used to live in New York and London, and, but I also wanted people to not assume that I was automatically a part of everything that they were a part of. I was coming from a different place. I wasn't fully this West Coast girl anymore. And it can sometimes, being amongst the people that you know or the culture that you know the most, is sometimes the place you can feel the most different and the most, because you can see the subtleties of how that gets spread apart, or the separation. And it took me a long time, actually, to kind of adjust and find my way back into being who I could be within this West Coast experience. So I finally made it. It took me about 10 years. But now I'm here. Yay!
Yay, gender!
So we can go to Selena. We've got to hear about, it looks like we all have Native American backgrounds. We're all proper Americans in some sense. But I wanted to invite Selena to talk about if you've had an experience out of a group that you found support in, or a group you found excluded from.
Well, it's funny because I tell the story often that I'm stuck in the era of being in my 30s and have been since I was 17. And last week I told the story of being 17 and being a mom, and then I went right to work. And And I was ambitious and I excelled at work, and so my peers and other people who had children about my kids' ages were in their 30s in general in my life. That's just how it played out. And then I'm still feeling, even though I'm closer to 60 now, I still feel like my tribe is that group in their 30s. So anyway, it's an interesting dynamic as you two were talking about how I've gravitated to groups where it's not really my native group, as you might say, Ginger, but it's also where I find the most support. So it's an interesting dynamic that I don't know what that means, other than the fact that that's where I continue to find that fresh thinking and fresh valuable support. So anyway, that's what I want to offer at this moment. Thanks.
And do you have a story to add to this, the wonderful Allison Raby?
I was sitting here feeling into. First, I was really touched by the hats that you spoke of, Melissa. In church, and the big black lady church hats. And I was remembering my grandmother, my father's mother, and that threaded in as I was listening to all of you. It threads into something that I've been sitting with, but it's coming in a particular way. In this moment, sort of like one side of the crystal or the diamond or what have you, and I have been looking at this thing, but not from necessarily this side before, or this, anyways, another slice of the onion, which for me is really about where I find belonging and where I have found belonging. Doesn't necessarily have much to do per se for me with the color of my skin or my religion, or and I'm not. I guess I want to say this in a different way. So, for example, my half sister, who's a little bit older than me, and whose mother is black, my father's first daughter. I didn't know she was my sister for quite some time, which is a story for another day and a long story. But I would be dropped off at her house with her mom, and her mother would babysit me. Agnes would babysit me, and my sister hated me. I was, the white one. I was the one who had been given everything. I was the, oh God, I really don't want to say this out loud, but I'm going to. For her, I was the pretty one. I was the skinny one. I was the privileged one. And meanwhile, it's very interesting because we both were having very similar experiences of sexual abuse outside of the family. So we had these sort of connected experiences, and yet we were so disconnected in our connection, even as blood relatives. And so, but going to her house and to Agnes's house, and I loved Agnes, but I would walk in and there were pig's feet cooking on the stove, and pig's feet do not smell good to me. I just wanted to run out the door. I mean, there was nothing, and the house was dirty, and Agnes was incredible, and she was crazy. I mean, and I'm crazy too. Don't get me wrong. We all have our crazy, but I did not want to be there at all, and there was nothing about that experience or what I experienced often as like what was called black that I wanted to connect with. I also, my father's mother, Mama Raby, was everything to me. And when she died, there was a light of hope in my heart, and my 8-year-old heart that literally went out because she would say, I couldn't come over unless I was wearing an undershirt, which of course I rallied against. I didn't understand this important principle, but I later realized she wanted me to be protected on the inside. And I would come over, and she had plastic on her furniture. I mean, the woman literally had plastic all over her damn furniture. And I was like, what is this about with the couch and the plastic? Like, what are we going to do? You live alone. Like, what is going to happen to this furniture? And she was the only person that ever sat at the table with me. So in my house, we had no furniture. We just had pillows. We never, literally never sat at the table. I was given food on the floor and a green and blue shag carpet and in a bowl. And then I would receive another bowl, and there would be, a hamburger that was in the broiler. Like my mom we just didn't cook. I don't cook. My parents, nobody cooks. My dad barbecued. Anyway, so there was something about sitting at the table and wearing an undershirt and the care and love that my grandmother infused me with. And she took me to church, and I remember, to Black Lady Church is what I used to call it. And I remember the singing and the hats and the way I felt in my body. And so it's just so interesting to me that here is this one place where, that was, quote unquote, black people, one side of my family, and another side, black people, another side of my family. And one place I felt so much belonging and so much, yes, I want to be a part of this. And another place I was like, oh, I love you people, but I don't want any part of this. In the meantime, the last thing I'll say is that my parents were very much in a place of, it's not about color, it's not about religion, it's not about gender, it's about all beings being. And there's something for me that's beautiful about that, and that I have really found myself sitting in a particular way, especially lately. That said, there's also a way, and actually this is perfect, Melissa and Jerome Braggs were the first people that really opened my eyes and my heart and my exploration around diversity and inclusion in a deep way in my adult life. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Mama. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you helped me begin a journey that has become the fire of the heart of my life, and I never thought that that I would feel this call so strongly. But I remember Jerome saying, if you tell me that you don't see color, you're telling me that you don't see me. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I love you, honey, and it doesn't work for me for you to tell me that you don't see color. Here's my experience, and I honor yours. And it was really helpful. And so that's one of the things that at some point I'd love for us to talk about on this show, and I don't know if there'll be time today, but Melissa, I think I heard you say Black and African American, and I often don't know what to call myself. Am I Black? Am I African American? And how do I know what to call other people? And how do I ask those questions without offending people? How do I, as someone who, looks white, is Black and Jewish, I often don't know how to move in the world and how to get the information I need to get while being, so I can really see others and be respectful. And I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, and I'm getting nervous, so I'm putting my foot in my mouth again. And I'm okay with that, because I really want to know. And there's so much that I really don't know, and I'm trying to learn. So I'm curious about that.
Do you have an idea about that, Melissa? What's your experience when you have conversations with people and how they respond to you or speak to you or use terminology, I guess?
Yes, definitely. Oh, thank you all for sharing. This is really beautiful. For me, my experience is that it comes from the person's own choice. Sometimes for me, I will use Black and African American interchangeably, just depending on how I'm feeling, what's going on, what the context is, what the situation is. For me, one of the reasons, and I will ask people, because, I've met some people who they always call themselves African American, and that's what they want to be called, and others who they're Black, and that's what they want to be called as well, and some people who say, okay, call me African, or what have you. And I think just allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, and I think Alice and I talked about this before, allowing ourselves to own up to that we are ignorant in some ways. None of us know everything, and we especially don't know everything about another person and how they would like to be addressed. So just allowing ourselves to say, okay, I'm ignorant about this, so can you help me, or can I ask you this question? And I find that a lot of times people really appreciate that. They appreciate that you are letting go of this ego of like, I have all the answers, I know exactly what's right and what to say. Just going, all right, here I am in my ignorance, and can you help to enlighten me in this sense? And so for me, I use Black a lot of times because Black encompasses like all of the people from the African diaspora. So no matter whether they're in Brazil or the Caribbean or Europe or wherever, it's kind of a way of collectively identifying and saying, oh, this is a Black person. We all have origins in Africa. And then I think for African American, it's just really a way to identify that connection to Africa and to honor those roots and to say, okay, this is what I am. And I also know African people from Canada, and maybe they say they're African Canadian, but then they're also Black because they were part of the African diaspora. So I think it's really important to just ask people what they prefer and how they like to be addressed, and that makes it just really received.
And then, and then there's the extra part of the conversation, because that's also very true now within the trans community, and being open to each person's, what their identity is and how they, which is wonderful, and I agree with you that it's really important to just evoke continually that conversation. But then there's the larger thing is when, for instance, I'm a writer and a journalist, and how we write about it and how we use those words to describe certain experiences and how we engage in that and how we talk about it when we're not necessarily on a one-on-one conversation with someone, and we run the risk of 100 strangers reading what we write. And have you encountered that in the work that you do, and how you express the work that you do? Do you have a kind of rule about how you deal with that, whether it's gender or race or even economic status, for instance? That can be something.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things too that we've been talking a lot about, kind of race, ethnicity, all that. And my work in diversity and inclusion is, I call it true inclusion, where it's like you spoke about, like gender, how your sexual preference, all of that, socioeconomic status, even religion, everything, physical, mental ability. Like, how do we all, feel included? Because we're all a part of this world. And you know what, Ginger? Like, somebody's always going to be offended. Like, no matter what. I've just found, no matter what you say, no matter what you write, there's always going to be someone who's going to take some kind of offense to it. So it's like, okay, how do I, set that intention that I am doing the best that I can with what I know? I think Maya Angelou said it so beautifully and so wonderful. Just said, you just do the best you can with what you can, and when you know better, do better. And that's like the most that we can ask of ourselves and each other, is that we do the best that we can, and to trust that we are doing the best that we can in that moment. And when we know better, when we get a little more enlightened or have more information, then we're going to do better. So when you're writing or putting something out there, just so that people know, or however you set the tone or set that intention, that I'm coming from a loving place in my heart and I am intending no harm, that people are going to feel that and they'll know that. And those who don't, they're going to be offended. Maybe they're going to write you and be like, why you say that? Or you just said it different, or what have you, and then you can deal with it at that level.
Which I think is a powerful way to approach it. And it was funny, this was something I was honored by a couple of years ago. I wrote an article about living in Oakland and walking through Oakland. And essentially, the article spanned a lot of things. It was called Even Gangsters Sneeze. And it was about the necessity of, if you move to a new neighborhood, if you move to Oakland, that you need to engage in the neighborhood. You need to be seen. You need to see others. You need to walk. That was the basic sense of it. But then exploring people's misconceptions, mythologies about the poor black neighborhood, and they see that, and then they don't go any deeper, and that's a real problem, and that continues to reinforce segregation and poverty and racism and all sorts of different things. And, you know, it was a very long article, and I called it Tales from the White Side. I outed myself that this is purely just my perspective, and this is what I think, you know. And that article was one that happened to go viral, so I had quite a few people read it, and people on Twitter were talking about it, which is very exciting for a journalist when you have that experience. And one of the funny comments was from this young woman, and she said, "This is a pretty good article by a white lady, I think." And I was so honored by that, because it meant that, you know, and I look back on that article sometimes now that I've lived in Oakland for a couple more years to just sort of check, like, were there parts that had a few blind spots, or, you know, because I know more than I did at that time. And for the most part, it stand up, but I think I could do a follow-up article now that I am actually genuinely more involved in the neighborhood and know lots of people in it. So, and then I wanted to sort of shift gears a little bit, because you kind of brought it up, is that Allison and I have been talking about this concept of the dark side of enlightenment. This area where, yes, people will get offended, and sometimes that offense can have consequences, because it can get professors fired, it can limit the conversation, it can border on this exclusion, actually, if people become so rigorous about their own outrage. And we're seeing it more and more and more. Have you had an experience with that, or do you have something to speak to that, your own dark side of enlightenment, where people are attempting to seek something and they just go to this strange path with it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. It's yeah, and I've actually heard stories, and I've witnessed, you know, situations as well where, you know, and there are so many sides of things. So there's a way, at least for me, I can tell if someone is genuinely, you know, putting in an effort. You know, if someone is genuinely wanting to learn and grow and develop, and they're open to that. And then I've seen on the other side where people are kind of stuck in their ways, and they feel like, I have a right to say whatever I want to say, and that's just how it goes. I don't want to change it, I don't want to alter it, and other people just need to deal with it. And so in those cases, I know there have been, you know, things in, of course, the education system where a professor maybe will say something that is, you know, taken as being racist or being offensive or what have you. And there can be the consequences where, yes, they get fired and all that. So I kind of touch on, you know, I've been talking to people kind of more lately about, you know, restorative justice and all that, and how do we actually engage in conversations and see from that other person's point of view, like, what are their intentions? Where are they coming from? What is their meaning? And are they willing to be open to receive information and to transform? And if so, then everyone deserves to be given a chance to grow and to transform. I mean, we're all humans. That's part of who we are, evolving, you know. And but if someone they're stifled and they're stuck in their ways, and they're like, nope, this is how I am, this is how I want to be, then, you know, maybe they need to go be that somewhere else with other people who want to be that way. So I definitely just having those conversations, you know. And for me, myself, I'm just thinking about when I finished my undergraduate in Alabama, and I actually had some experiences what Allison was talking about within the Black culture of having, you know, my own feelings of being excluded within my own, you know, culture and race and all that. And then I went to graduate school at the University of Notre Dame to do my master's in computer science and engineering. and that was mostly all white people. So I went from a historically black college and university to a university that is, Catholic and prestigious and mostly all white people. And that was quite a journey to say. But it was so fascinating because I really connected with a fellow student who is who's physically challenged. She had cerebral palsy, and we started at the same time. We were in a lot of the same classes. But I found myself in this place of, ignorance and not really knowing, what to do. I wanted to connect with this person. We were actually interested in some of the same things, some of the same projects and all that. And I just chose to allow myself to be vulnerable and to express the ignorance that I was having and feeling, because I didn't really know how to react. I mean, she was mostly paralyzed. She was in a wheelchair, and I would be like falling over myself and trying to open every door and do, just do all of these things, not knowing exactly how to respond and how to be. And it was about, okay, let me ask what she wants, what she needs, and be open for my own growth, my own development, my own evolution. And that really opened a whole nother world for me. And she let me know what she wanted and what she needed. And she wanted to be empowered. She wanted to be independent. She wanted to do all of the things that she could do on her own. And she let me know that if there was something that she needed my help with, that she would let me know. And I was like, okay, this is great. And we ended up working on our master's thesis project together. And out of that came, we both worked together to develop a voice-activated mouse. And this was back in the mid-90s or so. So before the whole sound recognition, pattern recognition technology was advanced and out there. And we worked together endless hours on this project. And it was she wasn't able to speak fluently. She could make distinct sounds. So we used the sounds that she could make, and we did all of this, sophisticated pattern matching and sound recognition technology to be able to then move the mouse on the screen to allow for her to be able to navigate without having to use her hands. And that was kind of also a beginning of this revolution of including, Americans with disabilities, and how to have software technology, human-computer interface technology that would work for everyone and not excluding so many people in the country. And while we're all moving ahead with, computers and technology, and we're leaving behind a whole group of people. So that for me was absolutely amazing, and really just, opened me up to a whole nother world of how, it's not just about, me and the things that I deal with race and culture and not feeling included in that way. But here's a whole another group of people who are also not feeling included. So we were able to really connect and bond over those similarities, and then actually offer something to the world that is beneficial.
That's amazing, and engineers are very important, and engineers like you are very important. And it also made me think of, there's a really great, it's an organization, but they do a yearly event and a performance, and it's Sins Invalid, and it's a performance that celebrates and honors every single form of challenge, disability that there could be, everything from cerebral palsy to deafness to being a crip, as they call it. Or it could be depression, or it could be chronic illness, the things that people are not necessarily, they can't see by looking at you. And it wasn't just amazing to see the performance and all of these different people expressing themselves and in multimedia ways, so that as much as possible, everybody in the audience could have an experience, whether they're deaf or blind or, whatever. And And it was amazing to be in an audience with all these people that don't often get to go out and go see a performance because things aren't set up in a way that allows for them to be able to engage with it. And it was a very profound experience to be there, and amazing, and it made me think that at least something I would like to have at every event that I do, which unfortunately is a little bit expensive, but is to have an interpreter there. At least that. You know, it would be amazing that in all things, if there was always that option and that somebody there. I look forward to a world where that will be a regular occurrence. But I wanted to hand over the reins to Allison Raby, because she is going to maybe share a story about this as well, but also to talk about the upcoming conference and all the things that are going to be happening very soon.
I'm so touched by what you shared, Melissa. So yeah, on that there's something about if we can just come together and help each other, what is possible. So thank you for doing that and modeling it. Yeah, I'm sort of choked up with emotion, and Ginger, I definitely want to know about that organization. That sounds like that's so there's a couple things. One, I'd actually love for you to talk a little bit, Melissa, about the events and how we create a diverse and inclusive experience, and leading up to the event and the event itself, etc. The other thing that I wanted to say, and I think I've said this to each of you, but I'll say it on live TV, which is that I often in my exploration of diversity and inclusion realize I'm going to, you know, as I think I said it before, put my foot in my mouth and, you know, maybe my whole leg down my throat. So there's a couple of things that I'm running. You know, one, I want to say I've also had experiences of feeling really included and excluded in the Jewish community, which is another part of my heritage, and in the and I was also my parents really cared about education and put me in very fancy schools, and I had no money, and being included and excluded by that, you know, by those folks, and so for me, there's inclusion, exclusion that's happened pretty much in every aspect of my life, and that's been true in religion. That's been true. So there was something about the black lady hats that my white mama, who you know, Melissa, wears with some regularity. I have fun searching for the big church black lady hats for her. And yeah, so the leg down the throat thing that I want to say is that for me, and you've really touched on it, Melissa and Ginger, around inclusion for me is about everyone. It's about all of us. It's about, you know, people who are obese. You know, I have recently gained quite a bit of weight, and people treat me differently. And I can't imagine if I, you know, gained an extra 100 or 200 pounds, like what that might feel like. People who are too old. I know that from the search work that I do of, you know, there's this phrase, well, we don't want someone who's too long in the tooth, but of course we want the best candidate, you know. And I, you know, I'm not buying into any of this, but, you know, people who are too young, that seems to be less and less so now. But when I started my first business when I was 21, that was not sexy and not cool, and I was told that I was an idiot, you know. And what are you thinking? There are people, you know, with all of the disabilities that you named, and so there is something that, and this is funny. I wonder what unconscious bias is at work, but I feel like because I'm black, because I'm a woman, because I'm Jewish, you know, that I can sort of say, you know, this is about all of us, and there are conversations that do need to happen, you know, for every single. There are individual conversations, and I just think about like the history of the black side of my family and the history of the Jewish side of my family, particularly the black side of my family, there are conversations that really need to be had about like how not okay and how unfair and what needs to change. Yes, absolutely. And I think they're going to need to go on until the dawn of time. And I also want to say, you know what, this is not just about black people. This is not just about women. This is not just about brown people. This is about, for me, yes, it is just about that, and it's also about all of us. And it's not just about women, it's also about men. And if we don't all come together to do this together, I feel like there's just going to be one more group who says, okay, now it's our turn, and we need to have center stage, and we're going to keep doing this cycle. And I've used this example in the past of, there were these dogs that were the bad dogs, and first it was, it was the Doberman Pinschers back in the day. I don't know when I started saying back in the day, but I've really gotten old enough to say back in the day. And then it was the Rottweilers, they were the bad dogs. And now it's the Pit Bulls, and the truth is, it's like, no, it's actually kind of about how these dogs are treated. And if there's something bad that's happening, if they're biting, then there's probably a reason, and they've probably been really, really, really hurt. And there are many of them that are not biting. And in fact, the most dog bites on the planet are by Chihuahuas, statistically. And I think this is true actually for us as humans. So can we all come together and say, yes to these individual conversations, yes to repairing the damage that has been done, yes to saying, no, that's not okay, and also yes to we are all human beings and let's do this together, and let's start asking those questions from a vulnerable place and saying, tell me, how I can, tell me how I can be loving and respectful of you. Tell me how, what you would like, like you did, Melissa, with your friends, how would you like me to open every door? Would you like me not to? How can I, what can I do that would feel really good to you? What would feel like support? And how can we do that with everyone? And I know there are so many white people I talk to that are like, I don't know how to even begin to do this. They don't want me in this conversation. They're going to throw eggs at me. I can't, there's no way that I don't even know how to, that's kind of what happens, And I care, and I want it, and I don't know. So, yeah, and I don't see the folks who, I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a wheelchair, or to lose my legs, or to lose my arms, or to lose my eyes, or to, my goodness. Can we all start speaking up on behalf of each other, on behalf of all of us, and the planet, and all the feathered and winged and swimming friends? It's like, there's some part of me that is like, yes to, and my dad was a black civil rights activist, right? So there's a little bit of heresy in me that's like, so yes to black civil rights. And you know what? Can we widen this fucking conversation? Excuse my French, but can we widen this fucking conversation? And can we keep having those conversations? Because I think that's what's going to make the difference for everyone, including black civil rights. And so, anyways, I want to know how you feel about that, Melissa. And yeah, I know we're running out of time, and this is also invigorating. And so I'll just say the events are going to be amazing. We are doing an entire day dedicated to these conversations on Thursday. We are doing a pathway that will be a day long as part of our 9 pathways, the Path of the Wisdompreneur on Friday, that is related to diversity and inclusion and how empathy and awareness can increase your ability to drop unconscious biases, et cetera, et cetera. So we will be weaving diversity and inclusion in as literally as an initiative through all of the events that we're doing on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the breakout session that we're doing at Wisdom 2.0 on Saturday will be focused on diversity and inclusion as well. And Melissa is going to help us design these events and help us to embody true diversity and inclusion. Both Melissa and Ginger will be with us on Thursday and helping to design, co-create, co-facilitate that day. Melissa's going to handle all of the diversity and inclusion pieces related to the entire event series. So that.
Well, I think it's good now to go maybe we'll follow up with our wishes for people, or something we want to hand to our audience or give to our audience or wish for our audience. And I would like to follow up on that is that I am incredibly grateful for the people when I was much younger who answered all my questions, who were willing to engage with me and to allow me to say all the stupid, offensive, horrendous things that were floating around in my mind, to speak them out loud so I could look at them and talk with me and answer my questions. And that's not anything anyone should ever have to do, but my wish is that if you're so inclined, that kind of person, that I am immensely, immensely grateful to those people, because I grew as a result, my world expanded, my empathy expanded, and I feel like more human now as a result of those conversations I would have and the people who gave me the grace of that. So my wish is, if you are so inclined, that person, and you are able to allow people to get all of that muck that's in them out and have a conversation about it, do so. You're giving a great gift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Ginger. And if you want to know what one of those people looks like, meet Ginger Murray, because I feel like you do that for me all the time.
Beautiful.
And do you have a wish for the audience, Melissa?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that we all just show up as who we are, and to let go of so many of these thoughts. What I found in my work, and I believe that diversity and inclusion is just inherent in everything that I do, and I wish for it to be just naturally a part of all of the events that we produce and everything that we put out there. And I find that a lot of people believe that somehow they are a bad person if they don't automatically know how to interact with someone or how to ask those questions. And it has nothing to do with you being a bad person. We just don't know everything. So it's about opening up and taking a lot of that judgment out of it. I believe that's why mindfulness practice is just so important and so vital, because it allows us to let go of so much of that judgment of ourselves and of others, and to just show up as who we are. And to really, one of the ways that I create these very diverse events that I do through Dragonfly Center and also with consulting with a lot of other organizations, is to do the work from the inside out. So to really look at ourselves and look at who are the people who are in our circles, who are the people that we communicate with, that we interact with, who are the people, if we were having a dinner party, who are the people that we would invite, and would they all look just like us, or would they be diverse? And that's the place where we start. And what is it that's holding us back? Is it the fear of connecting with other people because of the unknown? And allow ourselves to really open up to stepping into something new. And to look at our dinner table and go, wow, okay, here's just all kinds of people. And then that's going to reflect in everything that we do. I mean, people are going to feel welcome. They're going to feel drawn. Because I know I've seen a lot of events where people they will have a good intention. They say everyone's welcome, everyone's invited, but then all of the speakers and all of the presenters are white males or white or whatever that represents them. And I don't feel welcome. I don't feel included. I don't feel invited. I don't see myself represented at all. So that is a big part of it. So how do we make the people who are presenting, who are facilitating, how do we make that a diverse community so that people even feel it more naturally? That, wow, I am welcome. I am invited. And then reaching out, really putting in an effort is not just going to happen. We need to step up and put in the effort to connect and network with all kinds of people.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
I'm not wearing my big hat now, but I feel
it. Yes.
So, Melissa, what would your wish be?
That we all show up just as we are, without judgment of ourselves and others.
So would you like to close us out, Allison?
Selena.
My wish, kind of after hearing all these lovely comments today, is it's a lot like yours, Melissa, that we all show up with exactly bringing all of us to the table. You know, as I've been thinking about this topic for the last couple of weeks, I've realized I could have segregated myself many times over life. You know, too young, too old, a woman with a heritage that no one quite initially sees, a business owner, an independent person, someone who didn't go to college till later, a grandmother early or not. And also, you know, thanks for bringing up the obesity thing. I used to weigh 110 pounds more than I do today, and people treat you differently, and it's very interesting to notice how that changes your life. So my wish is like yours, Ginger, that we all show up bringing all of us to the table and understanding that everyone else probably has a lot of stories that aren't obvious, and that we respect that and hold that dear to our hearts and precious for the connection. Thanks.
So my wish is that I was beaten to death, and they told me that I was never going to walk again, and if I did, I would walk with a limp or I'd be dragging my leg. And I ended up finding a practitioner who got me up and walking, and I went to get gas. It was my first outing, and I had to go into the little place because it was that type of gas station. And the gentleman behind the counter, my experience was that he was being really mean to me. And I kept thinking, if you knew what I had been through, you wouldn't be treating me this way. You'd be much nicer to me. And I'm not sure what happened, but he turned around, and all of a sudden I had this, oh my God, I don't know what you've been through. I have no idea what happened to you this morning or yesterday or last month or last year or 20 years ago or fill in the blank. And he turned around and I said, hi, how's your day going? And everything changed in me and between the two of us. And my wish is that we all open both to ourselves and in ourselves and to others, and that we come to conversations and situations with an open heart and an open mind, and a sense that we don't know where anyone's been or what they've walked or what their background or heritage or belief systems, or we don't know what this puppy, what this dog, what this pit bull, what this Doberman, what this golden doodle, what this Chihuahua has been through. And maybe they just need to be picked up and held. That's my wish. Okay, we're going to keep doing this. I'm really excited. We're past time. As I mentioned, in the past time, and I have a very strange relationship. So my apologies, and thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Ginger. Thank you, Selena. Thank you, everyone who was with us today. We'll be here again next week to talk even more about diversity and inclusion, tales of inclusion, the dark side of enlightenment, and so forth.